Good morning, everybody. Or perhaps I should say good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from around the world today. My name's Julia Cairns. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at Social Marketing at Griffith, and I'm excited to be joining you today on this fabulous GovComms festival. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some thoughts and some ideas on how we can build better change or communication campaigns. And I'm going to use the analogy of a telescope or a microscope in discussing what to measure and when. And then I'm going to reflect on some of the work that I've done and use that approach to give you an idea of how it can be done. So, firstly, today's society is full of complex issues. I think we're all fairly familiar with that idea. And a lot of these issues have been around for a very long time. Health issues, social inequality issues, social injustice, the mitigation of our footprint on this earth. But as 2020 has shown us that there can be new and emerging issues such as COVID, which has created an unprecedented global emergency. But not only did COVID come out of nowhere and very quickly, but it has also exacerbated so many other issues and showed us how interconnected all of these issues are and how one social issue can make another one worse or more dominant or drive another wedge into our society. So another thing that COVID has shown us is that sometimes we are not that well equipped to react or to support behavioural change as quickly as we'd like, or perhaps as comprehensively as we'd like, or even as effectively as we would like to. So then, thinking about change programs, there's a couple of questions that we can ask ourselves when we are trying to build a campaign, or even reflecting on some of the campaigns we have in place or some that we've done in the past. And some of these questions are, do they resonate with the audience that we're trying to reach? Do they cut through the noise? Do they actually matter to what they are thinking about or their daily lives? Do they strike a chord and appeal to something inside those people? A second question, do they fit? Do they actually fit or work within the daily lives of these people that we're talking to? And then, do they result in change? So the world has shifted very quickly, and some of the things that we're talking about may be new, foreign, scary, frightening to people, and they may not be able to work these new ideas and these new things into their daily lives. Their daily lives may have shifted enormously. And if the messages that we're sending out or the change programs that we are building don't resonate with those people and they don't fit within their current situation, well then the answer to the third question may well be a no, we're not being effective in creating behavioural change. So then if there are gaps in this resonance or this communication or this fit with the daily lives, then we may find that people don't know what to do. The message may not have got through. They haven't taken the message on board. It may not even be a case of them having switched off to some of the messaging, but they may well have not switched on to the messaging. And therefore, some of the things that we're asking them to do, some of those calls to action, may not be getting through and may not be giving them the opportunity to respond. And then even if they are cutting through and they're not fitting within the daily challenges, the daily struggles and the daily situations that these people are dealing with, given that some of them may have, some circumstances may have changed considerably, they may try to make a change, but in doing so, it may be enormously difficult and they may try but end up failing to make a change, or it may become so difficult they start to cease trying. They give up on what we're actually asking them to try and do. So they're not absorbing that into their daily life and they're not translating it into change on a daily basis or a weekly basis or however often we're asking them to make a change. So then how can we do better? Well, one of the things that we need to think about is solid insights to underpin the development of effective programs and campaigns. Now, this is something that has always been important, but in this rapidly changing world that 2020 has thrown upon us, it becomes increasingly important. We need to have a really strong handle on these insights that we bring to our communication and behavioural change programs. So that then involves unpacking the who, the what, the when, the where and the why of what is going on with these audiences that we are communicating with and working with in our campaigns and our programs. And that who, what, when, where and why is both that of their current behaviour, the current things that are going on, and the future desired behaviour or state that we want to get them to. For example, if we're thinking about encouraging people to use public transport to reduce our environmental footprint, well, they may have had a desire to do that, but now they have a stronger desire to avoid that due to social distancing concerns. Or if going to the markets or the stores to buy fresh foods every day is now becoming something to be concerned about or feared, they may turn to buying more long-lasting and packaged goods, for example, because they don't want to be out there and moving around in large crowds. And if exercising was something they regularly did, perhaps some of their supports, their groups that they exercised with or their facilities they exercised within are now gone. So there's been changes around them and within them that now might be something worth considering. So to build that understanding, we need to capture the detail of the who, the what, the when, the where and the why. And that's where the measurement comes in. And part of deciding how to get that detail to build those insights and then go on to build those campaigns is figuring out what to measure and when. And one of the ways that I often think about that is through an analogy of the microscope and the telescope, and taking two alternative views of what's going on and trying to bring them together to create stronger insights. So firstly, looking through the microscope. And for many of us, this feels like the natural way to begin, to focus on those people that are at the heart of the issue and to try and figure out really where they're at and what's going on with them. So what do they know? What do they know about the issue at hand? What do they think about the issue at hand? What are their attitudes and beliefs about what's going on around them? Do they even care, or does it even register with them? And if it does, how do they feel about it? And how do they feel about what they're doing now and perhaps what they could be doing or what we would like them to be doing to make a positive step forward? What do they experience around what they're doing? What sorts of supports do they rely on, or do they charge through fairly independently to enact these behaviours? And what frustrates them? What blocks them from enacting their desires, or what helps them to do what they want to do, or perhaps what sort of funnels them along when they're not really thinking about what they're doing? So once we've had a look through the microscope and got a feel for what people are thinking and feeling and where they're at and what they're doing, then we can start to look through the telescope. So this is about looking at the environment that surrounds the people that we're concerned with, or the people that we're helping to change. So we're looking at what is around them and what helps them to behave and what hinders them from doing that. Now, we may already know some of, or had some sort of inkling of some of these things through some of the things that the people have told us when we are zooming in on them through the microscope. But this is about taking a slightly more objective view at those structures that are around them and really asking, well, could they do what we are asking them to do? What does a positive state look like in terms of supports or services around people? How easy is it now? How easy could it be if if we made some changes, would it feel normal for them to make a positive change to their behaviour or what they're doing? Would it feel out of place in terms of their social, for the people around them? Would they feel like the odd person out taking on a new behaviour? Are there cultural norms that would impede their process, and so on? And then once we've had a microscope view and a telescope view, it's time to look at the middle, because really when we're thinking about the microscope, it's not so much what you or I think or what anybody thinks and what they say or what they plan to do. It's what they actually do that really matters for us as we're asking people to change their behaviour. So looking in the middle is about observing that behaviour in action. So seeing what people do in a place or space where you can, if that is an issue that you're able to do, to observe their behaviour playing out every day, and to start to see the connections perhaps between what people are thinking and feeling about something and what that environment or those surroundings are doing as well. So it starts that process of triangulating insights and starting to think about strategies that could be put in place in a particular situation or a particular location, for example, and starts to get you to think about what can be done. So now I'm going to step through this way of looking at a behaviour change issue using a case study from some of the work that I have done in the past, and that is encouraging healthy eating for military personnel. So this was the development of the Go Food campaign, and really when we're starting to think about military personnel as perhaps young and fit people, it is incredibly important for them to eat well because it keeps them healthy, and importantly it helps them to effectively and productively perform the roles that they do. And they're active and very sort of demanding roles, so eating well is going to keep them basically at the top of their game and able to sort of endure long days or busy days, etc. But a lot of military people are certainly young people, and they are making a transition from, say, home life or school life to a new military life, which is quite different to the civilian life that they have been leading up until that point. And as they progress through their career, it can be a very transitory life. So they may move from posting to posting, base to base, for example, and from living and working on a base some days to weeks out in the open in a field environment doing exercises and training. So prior to Go Food, we started to try and get to know the people. So in order to do this, we spoke to a lot of the stakeholders, people that work with military personnel often, their commanders, their trainers, people that live on base with them and work with them on base, to get their perspective of why some military people eat well and some others less well, for want of a better word. So some of them eat quite poorly. And then we interviewed personnel to figure out what their motives for eating were. So what did they feel eating does for them, or what do they feel is an appropriate diet for them? How do they go about turning that into action? And we also asked them about the opportunities they have to eat on base, off base, in their daily life, and so on. We also asked them about their abilities, like how were they obtaining meals? How did they get involved in that? Were they cooking for themselves at home or in their on-base accommodation? Were they using the facilities that were nearby? What was their level? How did they consider their level of skill to be in preparing food or cooking food to allow them to eat in the way that they wanted to do? So we started to get a picture through these stakeholder perspectives and these interviews about some of the reasons why people eat the foods they do and some of the opportunities and abilities that are available to them. And the strongest message coming through was really health didn't matter to them. So they didn't necessarily see eating as eating for health. It was more about eating for performance. So giving them that energy, giving them that ability to keep on and on each day and to be sharp and alert and to perform their roles as effectively as they can. So then we moved to the telescope view. So we started to get to know the environment around them. And of course, when you take a civilian person out of their civilian life and put them into a military life on a military base, it is quite a different environment to perhaps what they have grown up with. So we looked at the type of facilities and outlets around them that provided food to them. So this was the military dining facilities on base, for example, and their cafes and cafeterias and coffee shops and so on, and also any other outlets that were nearby, say, for example, in driving distance of a military base. And then we looked at the availability of healthful options in any of these outlets, stores and food providing outlets, retail outlets, and so on. And we looked for other support that would perhaps enable or facilitate people to eat better, information, pricing, and other facilitators and barriers. And in doing so, one of the things that we did see was there wasn't a lot of support for healthy eating. It really was a reflection of the existing larger environment that we all live in. And these military people, even if they were wanting to eat really well to remain on top of their game, were going to find it very, very difficult to enact those desires in the type of environment they were living in, both on and off the base. So then the next step from there was to get to know that interaction, to have a bit of a look at what's happening when you bring the people and the environment together and to see that behaviour in action. And to do that, we used direct observation and plate photography and in doing so, classifying their choices as healthy, moderately healthy and least healthy. So we went into their dining facilities as a place where many of them go and a place that we were looking to change and to increase healthy eating in that space. And we observed them coming and going and how they interacted with the foods provided, the services provided and the structures around them. And then we photographed a lot of the plates once the diners had selected their meal for the day, and we looked at what they had chosen on their plate, and we classified them to see how many choices were the most healthy things in the room, offered in the room, and the least healthy things and the things in the middle. And that gave us an idea of where people were at and how they were interacting with that environment and how perhaps the two of those things were coming together to create behaviour in that space. So then after doing all of those things, taking the microscope view, taking the telescope view, and then looking at it as it interacts in that behaviour in action space, we started to bring it all together and figure out what were the key things that were going on and more importantly, what were the key things that we are actually able to change? What were the opportunities for us as change makers and what were the points of leverage for actually putting things in place to create leverage for change? And the first insight down here on the bottom right-hand side of the diagram was that we needed to appeal to their performance motivations. Talking about healthy food and healthy options and eating for health was not going to resonate with this audience. It wasn't going to cut through. It wasn't something they were particularly concerned about, their long-term health. And when we spoke about health and healthy food, it fell on deaf ears because they weren't thinking about their long-term health. They were very concerned with their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month performance and how eating could help them achieve those goals. So that was the first insight. The second insight was that the environment was not optimal. They perceived that they had limited opportunity, but our objective observations of the environment also confirmed that. So we then were looking to change the environment, the products and the positions of products to enable or to create more opportunities for them to enact their desire to eat well. And also for those people who aren't necessarily always thinking 100% about what they're eating, to make more of those things available and obvious so that they can perhaps do it without putting too much thought into it. And then we tested two campaigns or two programs within the GoFood brand. The first was just a communications campaign. So we started to pick up those those performance motivations and connect those to healthy foods with messages such as go lean, stay lean and keen with protein, and things like go fresh, gain an edge with crisp fruits and salads. So not mentioning health at all, but really starting to position healthy foods as a way to achieve a high level of performance or effectiveness in your job. And the second arm of the program, we changed the dining environment. So we had noticed in our telescope view that it was a busy environment. They were often just flowing through in a big long line to get to the foods. And the first point that they would come to was an area where there was a lot of baked or fried or so on foods. And then afterwards, they would come to fresher, lighter options and salad options and so on. So we created some healthy express options at the front of the room, the first thing they come to, and then we also put in place, I should say we moved and modified some of the other things so that they were up front and centre, some of the most obvious things in the room, and then they were getting to the hot and more energy-dense foods at the last thing that they do. So it kind of created that way to bring those healthy foods to their attention very quickly, so that reminding the people that were trying to eat healthy that it's here, I'm here, choose me, and those that weren't necessarily thinking heavily about what they're eating but moving through being quite busy people, not necessarily concentrating, putting a lot of thought into what they were doing. It was also prompting and priming them to take a look at these healthier options and perhaps consider those instead of the things that they would come to last. So then to evaluate, we used the same methods that we used in examining the interaction. We used the direct observation and the plate photography and classified their choices according to our same scheme, looking for those red, least healthy options, the green, most healthy options, and the ones in between. Now, we could have also measured more about how they think and feel about it, and we have done some of that work in our other campaigns, or we could have then taken some more objective views of the environment as well and paired all that together. But for the sake of this case evaluation, we looked at what was going on in that behavioural space, the most critical space. And what we found was that for the communications alone, there was an increase in that middle group of foods, those moderately healthful ones. And although a 0.7 difference doesn't necessarily seem like a lot, over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of diners, there was about 6,000 in this whole program, it meant basically that 7 out of 10 diners chose one more moderately healthful or one more orange item on their plate. And then when we put the communications together with the dining room modifications, we found that 3 out of 10 diners were choosing one more green option, one more of the most healthful options. So that was a good result for that campaign as well. And in essence, both campaigns had good results because they were prompting another choice of a moderately or a moderately or the most healthful item. So then, just some concluding thoughts based on a microscope and telescope view, or what to measure and when. The deep understanding that we can create by taking two alternative views and bringing them together can help us build better change programs. So looking closely and broadly and at the interaction, many of these can capture what is going on with the people and what they're thinking and feeling and how they are turning those sorts of things or attempting to turn those things into action, and also how the environment can facilitate or constrain those behaviours. Then you can create strategies based on those insights and turn those into programs, and the measures afterwards will gauge how far the needle has moved. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your interest and attendance, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the GovComms Festival. Thank you.